All right, we hope that everybody's having a good day today. Glad to have everybody here with us. We're going to be looking at some introductory material into 1 Corinthians chapter 1, or excuse me, 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, dealing with the real problem of disorder in worship. Now, excuse me just a minute while I get a little bit to drink and get a little bit of it on me. When most people think about 1 Corinthians chapter 11, the first thing that wants to come to mind is, well, this is the head covering chapter. But when we are going to go through this material and we're looking at what Paul is actually dealing with, he's still dealing with the overall problem that's been going on at Corinth, and that is division. Division and disorder, schisms. Now it is showing itself in the worship assembly. How is it showing itself? By the means of the head covering. This has to do with authority as well, but Paul is dealing with something more than just the head covering. What was the problem? What does it finally get down to? That's what we're wanting to discuss. This is a symptom. The head covering is a symptom of something deeper. Like we said, if you go to the doctor and you say, "Hey, doc, I've got a headache." Well, if he just treats something to get rid of the headache, to get rid of that pain, he's not really dealt with the problem. He's dealt with a symptom. Let's get down to the root of it. If we can arrive at the problem, why it was a problem, and the principles that underlie it, then we can solve problems that people have. Now, when we're looking at our very first point, what it is that we are dealing with, it's a condition of disorder. The manifestation of it was in the head covering. Now, it can be manifested in different ways. In chapter 1, it's manifested by the fact that you have some individuals saying, well, I'm of this preacher, I'm of this evangelist, I'm of this person, so on and so forth. And we know that those type of things are not going to produce harmony inside the Lord's body. What we're needing to make sure that we're doing is we're following what God says. So as long as a man, or a woman for that matter, is not in a official sense or an assembly sense, but as long as I'm getting guidance and I'm getting counsel from somebody and they're going to the Bible to get it, then okay, I'm going to follow after that person's advice. I'm not just going to follow after a person just because they are a particular person. That would end up being a respecter of persons and having a respect for them above that which is written. So we're not wanting to do that. But disorder is connected to failure to understand an important principle. Now, what principle was being overlooked with the congregation here at Corinth? And it's not just a problem with the congregation here at Corinth. It's a problem throughout many congregations of the churches of Christ, and especially of those that are out in denominationalism, that are rooted and grounded in man-made traditions and their own divisions. The principle that is being overlooked is the principle of authority. That is what is being established with the head covering. You're not respecting authority. The heart of this chapter is establishing a respect and an appreciation for authority. The covering is related to that issue. In Corinth, the custom was, if you are married and you are reverencing your husband, then you're going to wear a veil. You're not going to go out with your head uncovered. You need to respect that. You need to show that submission through that means to your husband. In our culture, it's by wedding rings. What if a husband or a wife goes out and then he ends up taking off his or her wedding band or the engagement ring? What are they doing? They're not respecting the relationship that they have entered into, and they're advertising to other people. I'm not respecting this. I'm trying to overturn it. I'm trying to subvert it. That's what's happening here. Now notice, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 16, right out of the gate, that head covering simply is a custom. But if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God. That's what we want to get out in front, in the open, right away. The head covering is not an ordinance. It is not a command of God that women must go around with their heads covered. You go into different cultures, that is the custom. Okay, if Christians go into that country and they have that custom so as to help people to obey the gospel and to receive the truth, women do not need to behave themselves unseemly. They need to not do anything that is going to do that and hurt the influences of the congregation. So here we're still dealing with the issues of Christian liberty as well. Well, I don't have to do this. I have the right to go without my head uncovered. We realize that. We are looking at things that are going to regulate or cause us to pull back our liberties. This is one of them. Women, you do not have to wear a veil. However, if you go into a country like Corinth, Aquila and Priscilla, if they end up going into Corinth, which they did, Acts chapter 18, guess what Priscilla's going to have to do? She's going to start covering her head so as to respect her husband. So let's notice how Paul starts. 11 verse 1 and 2. Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. So even here, early on, Paul is establishing the order of authority. We follow Paul. Why do we follow Paul? Because he's following after Christ. Now I praise you, brethren, that ye remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances as I delivered them to you. Now, what are these ordinances? The ordinances are traditions. Traditions are those things which are handed down. These are not man-made traditions that Paul is establishing, that Paul is discussing. He's talking about God-given ordinances that were received by inspiration. It's not the head covering. Most people jump to the head covering and say, oh yeah, that's the ordinance. No, no, no. That's the custom that respects the ordinance, that establishes the ordinance. The ordinance is about to be shown to us. So the key to solving disorder is always the proper respect of authority. Why is there so much division in the religious world? Because people do not respect the authority of God and of His Word. Just take, for example, a home without authority. What do you have? Mom and dad, they're not on the same page. Neither one is recognizing the other one's authority. What about the children? It's going to be chaos. A nation without authority. We're seeing that today in our society. It's anarchy. It's disorder. It's unruly. Then what about the church without authority? It's also going to be found in chaos. But the church has a head. The head of the body is Christ. Ephesians chapter 1, 22 and 23, Colossians chapter 1 and verse 18. So here's the pattern of authority that's being established, and that's what Paul is trying to illustrate to these brethren. There is a pattern of authority. You're not just left to yourselves or to your own devices. But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. Here is the establishment of order. Who is in charge? Well, ultimately, God the Father is in charge. Who is underneath Him? Christ. Now, if you consider that, that's what the word head is referencing. It's the sense of authority. And if you put it in reverse, here's what we have. God, Christ, man, then woman. What is Paul establishing? This is the ordinance. This is the command. This is the tradition. That is the case throughout all congregations of the Lord's church, of the churches of Christ. In churches of Christ, this is the order. God, Christ, man, woman. Why don't you have any women elders, or women deacons, or women teachers, or song leaders up there leading prayer? Because that's not their place. That is not their position in the established order. We respect this authority, this line of authority that God has given to us. So this is the authority in the assembly of the church. And here is where the principle comes in. He's establishing, here's the line of authority. Now I'm going to present something, I'm going to deal with something where you are actually undoing that line of authority. You are actually dishonoring it or not acknowledging it. So remember, God and Christ are the same in nature. Here's deity. Now here is a principle that we're trying to establish and that we're trying to work off of, and that Paul is even going to illustrate when he's writing this letter to the brethren of Corinth. God and Christ are the same in nature. They're both deity. They are both God, omniscient, omnipresent. All of those characteristics. God is love. God is a God of wrath, God of justice. That's Christ. That's Jesus as well. They share in all of those categories. Though the same in nature, yet they differ in function and work. Now, the Father, He purposed and He planned all of creation and the plan of salvation. The Son, He was the one who carried it out and executed God's plan so as to bring it into fruition. Now, why is this important? It is establishing in the minds of the church at Corinth that authority does not elevate one above the other. The Father is not higher than the Son just because the work is different. Now, that's a concept that a lot of people struggle with. They think, well, okay, there's the manager, assistant manager, and then, probably a manager in all these different departments, and then you got low-level employees, cashiers, and so on and so forth. Now, we recognize that there is authority that certain ones have that other people don't. But just because they have that authority, does that really make them any better or any more important than the rest? No. What good is a manager if he doesn't have employees to go about and carry out the business of the day? He's got a business with nobody to work for him and push his product. What about employees, but there is no manager, there's no or even a creator of the business? What good is that? You need all individuals engaged in working towards the same goal. But while you're working towards the same goal, what must you have? You must have, okay, who can we go for this? Who's going to make this decision? Well, this person is in charge of making these decisions. Okay, let's do this. It streamlines everything. If that's the case between the Father and the Son, then man is not higher than woman because work is different. Okay, so I get to stand before a mixed audience and teach and preach on a regular basis. Does that make me more important than my wife inside of the congregation? No, it does not. And as we move from 1 Corinthians chapter 11 into 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul is going to further establish that point by representing every member of the church as a member of the body. And though we have certain things within our bodies that, okay, my heart carries a lot of responsibility, but my heart is not any more important than my feet. I need my feet just as much as I need my heart. Otherwise, life is going to be very difficult without either one. The same principle is being established. All right, so he's establishing that early so that he can get into dealing with the situation of the head covering. So man and woman, as to nature, are equal. When it comes to salvation in particular, man is not any more important when it comes to salvation than for woman. Man is saved the same way that woman is saved. When they come into the church, the work is different, but each one is needed so as to carry out those different types of work. Some read this and say, well, you know what, this is just cultural. That back during this time frame, women were treated just like cattle. They're chauvinistic, they're toxic in their masculinity, so on and so forth. Paul, certainly aligning all these things and giving all these characteristics to Paul. And then they'll turn around and say, well, that's not applicable in our society. Yes, it is when it comes to the realm of the church. And even when it comes to the realm of the home, matters of the home. Who's the head of the home? Ephesians chapter 5. The head of woman is man. Women are to, or wives are to submit themselves to their husbands. Husbands are to love their wives. That's the order. The husband is the head at the house. Who's making the final decisions on matters? The husband. Why? So we can keep things streamlined. And guess what? We all need to be on the same page. Well, okay, if the husband's in charge, then he's more important. No. You cannot have a home, you cannot have a family without the wife. You cannot have a home, cannot have a family without the husband. I know what society says about that. If I want to be a single parent, I can do that. Yeah, you can do that, but that's not after God's design and God's order. This is not the case. What we see here on the screen, this is not the case. This is very much applicable for us today, and if more people would get on board with this and get online with it, then we would be relieving a lot of the problems and frustrations that we have going on in our society. So Paul is not denying equality of men and women. In the church, they are equal. They just have different roles. They have different work. It has to do with their place in the assembly. Now, just consider redemption. Further illustrating what's being presented. John chapter 14, verse 28. Ye have heard how I said unto you, I go away and come again unto you. If ye loved me, ye would rejoice, because I said, I go unto the Father, for my Father is greater than I. Now, some would look at this and say, okay, see right there, Jesus is denying his deity. And they would even go so far as to question, well, if Jesus and God are equal, then how can one say that one is greater than the other? Jesus is not denying his authority here. He is simply recognizing the authority. Jesus is in the flesh. He is man. He has come as the Son of God. To do what? Not to do his own will, but to do the will of him that sent him. But in all regards, both of them were God. Both of them are deity. Jesus is simply recognizing the authority. John chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus then says, I and my Father are one. How can they be one and the Father be greater? It is describing their individual work. And the orchestrator and the planner of the work The Father is the one who has authority over the Son. But just because the Father has authority over the Son does not then in turn always mean that the Son is lower. That's not what we have going on here. In fact, they are one. So when we say man and woman are equal, it does not mean that their place is the same in the assembly, just like in deity. Their places were not the same, but they both are one. They both are the same, and they both are deity. It is a pattern of authority, and that pattern of authority is also principled in creation, not culture. That's important. This idea is crushing religion today, that culture gets to decide who's actually in charge and who isn't. We are seeing that this is in fact a divine setup, and it's been a setup from the very beginning. Their fundamental principles found in creation, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 9. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. So we've gone all the way back to the beginning. Who was created first? Adam was. Who was created for him? Woman was. But why was woman created in the first place? Because man had a need. It was not good for man to be alone. So what did God do? Created woman so as to help him. You see, I'm not going to be able to make it without a good woman by my side. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 13, for Adam was first formed, then Eve. That's the established order. Included in this is the sin at creation. Notice 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 14. Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. What you have is a breakdown of the order, of the authority. Eve acting in a manner in which she was not supposed to. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 16. Notice what is being said unto her when it comes to the punishment that's going to be given to her. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception, and in sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. Now why is that? Because Eve stepped outside of what her role was. She should not have taken of the fruit and eaten it. She was deceived by Satan. She should have listened to her head. Now, Adam is also to blame because being the head of the household, he should have encouraged his wife, Eve. Eve, don't do that. You do not need to eat of that. And even when she took of it, Adam did not need to partake of it. But we're seeing the order and why this is the case. Woman stepped out. And when she stepped out, this was the punishment. This was the trouble that was presented. Check with the husband. Recognize the authority, your head. These verses teach us that men and women ought to glory in their distinctiveness, what Paul is writing about. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 12, for as the woman is of the man, even so the man also by the woman, but all things of God. The conclusion there, but all things of God. God is the one that made it this way. So what about the fact that I was born a male? All right, I appreciate that. I'm glad that I was made a male. What about my wife? I'm glad that she was made a female so that she and I could come together and be able to work together. We should glory in the fact that we have men, we have women, and that both are able to fulfill their respected roles. We do not need each other stepping out of each other's role so as to try and fulfill the other one's role. That's why you've got all the mess that you've got going on with these young people that can't decide, well, am I a boy or a girl? Because when it comes to the makeup of the home, there's no structure there. Life is all about structure. We need that. We do not need all of this dysfunction, this uncertainty that's being presented on every hand. We've got to get things in order in the home, in the church, throughout our country. Therefore, the fact that I am a man, I ought to recognize the responsibilities given to me. Okay, Micah, you need to act like a man. Those individuals that are created as women, born women, you need to recognize your role, recognize your responsibility. All right, let me behave as a woman. And the Bible goes through great detail to describe both roles that each one are to take. So, as we said, it's the same for women. And there's an attack today by society on what God has given to us. Well, women are just as good as men. Well, okay, yeah. But that doesn't change the fact that man is built a certain way to where he can do certain things that women cannot do. The only way that women can do what men do is if they start doing things to their body that alters their structure. They have to start doping in hormones that their body does not naturally produce. So you see they're trying to go against nature so as to get up to where the man is, instead of man appreciating women. So you see there's a mutual respect and appreciation that must go on. Why are women trying to be men? Because they're not getting the appreciation from men. Why is it that men are trying to be like women? Because women are not given the proper appreciation. They're attacking men when they ought to be recognizing, hey, you are who you are, I am who I am. Let's just get the job done. That's what we're needing. But see, there's too much pride and too much need for recognition and glory, instead of just realizing, hey, we are made and built to fit into the proper role so as to make this body, or make this unit, make this home, this congregation be able to function. Now, notice point number 4. Under this pattern, there is still mutual dependence. Okay, man is above woman. Well, that means he gets to push woman around. No. Well, man is above woman, so that means woman gets to hold a grudge and undermine what man is trying to do. No. There needs to be mutual dependence and mutual respect one for another. Notice verse 11. Nevertheless, neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man, and the Lord. Again, we see where the authority is coming in. This is coming by command of God. We need each other. Neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man. You cannot go along one without the other. Adam created first, then Eve, but this fact does not mean that there is no place for woman. There is a place for woman right there by his side. And thus, that's the reason why many people say that Eve was taken from the rib of Adam and not from the sole of his foot, because woman was not designed to be under man's heel. And woman was not taken from a portion of man's skull, or the top part of man's skull, because woman was not designed so as to be over man. But she was taken from a rib, because side by side, showing equality and working together to go about and to fulfill the roles that God has given. That's all that we're trying to establish. Each person has a work to do. And guess what? If I cannot do my work, if I'm having to step over into this role and to fulfill the work that women are supposed to do. Women cannot get their work done if they're having to step over into the role that men are supposed to be doing. Recognizing that line, respecting that from God in the Lord. This is a command of God, so that we can simply get things done. Notice verse 8. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Though Adam created first, he had a need. He was alone. He needed a helper. So Eve was created. She was brought to man, and she was called a helpmeet for him. Though I am a man, I would not be here had there not been a woman. So even right there, we need to recognize, we are brought into this world recognizing how wonderful and how great women are, because they produce men. Where would we be without our mothers, without women? There would not be anybody else. The fact that they are able to keep this process going, and that they have the capacity to be able to, perform that special work. And that's a shame too, that even in our society, that today, the birthing process, the fact that woman is able to produce children, and that is viewed with such disdain. That's a marvelous work. That's a marvelous responsibility that's given to woman, to the furtherance of our species and of our kind. It's a shame. It's funny. It's crazy how twisted things can end up being presented. Well, it just all boils down to not respecting the authority in which God has established. So as we conclude, here's what we have. As we said, the order of authority is the heart of this chapter. It's not focusing in on the head covering. Churches of Christ, women do not have to start covering their heads in the United States. We have no such custom in the churches. However, if you're to be a missionary, going off into another culture, and they have these type of customs where this is how the women show their submission to their husbands, okay, Christian women, that's what you're trying to show. That's what you're trying to present. Yeah, we reverence our husbands. Then you need to follow that. Rein in your liberty and submit yourselves to that. And there are cultures that have those type of customs. In the Marshall Islands, where my family spent 5 years living there and working with the locals of that small island in the Pacific Ocean, they had a custom that women were to wear long dresses or skirts, because if women went out in pants or shorts, they were viewed as being rebellious or loose, being hussies. Well, guess what? We're coming in America, we don't have that kind of custom. Women want to wear pants, as fine, as long as they're modest. Shorts, as long as they're modest, okay, fine. But you see there, going over into another country where we're trying to help them to obey the gospel, what do we not want to do? We do not want to do anything that would unnecessarily offend them and cause them to look at us sideways, as though we're just not, we just simply do not care about what they have to say on issues. So for 5 years, whenever my mother or my sister went outside, guess what they were wearing? One of the long flowery dresses that the islanders wore, or they're wearing some type of skirt. That's what we're discussing here. Now, why would we do that? Because we love people. We love them enough that we're willing to pull back on our liberty so as to make sure that they will listen to the gospel. We do not want the gospel to be hindered. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. That's why Paul refused to be paid by the brethren at Corinth. He did not want it to be said that he was just simply doing it for the money. So he made that decision. He had the right to be paid, but he sacrificed his right so that the gospel would not be hindered and that people would be willing to listen. So again, in worship, this order of authority must be recognized. In the churches, it must be recognized. The example of deity, as we mentioned, proves this. The example of creation proves this. God, Christ, man, woman. Third, every relationship must have authority. You have to have it. Otherwise, you're going to have chaos. Nothing is going to run smoothly. Number 4, in worship, this order of authority, it must be recognized. Oh, so as we already had that one in there twice. This order does not remove dependency. Man needs woman. Just because man is the head does not mean that he gets to bully and push around those that are underneath him. Why? Because man has a head, Christ. Guess what? I do not want Christ pushing me around, mistreating me, and treating me unfairly. So what do I need to do? I do not need to do that to the person underneath me. And especially with that person being my wife, somebody that I claim that I'm supposed to love and care for. And even in the scriptures, going back to that idea of, well, this is just society of the time, this is just culture of the time, that men really did not respect women. You look at the relationship between Abraham and Sarah. Abraham loved his wife. With Jacob, well, even before that, Isaac and Rebekah, Isaac loved his wife. Jacob and Rachel, Jacob worked 7 years for his wife. I mean, are you going to do that for somebody that, I think I like them? No. Yeah, I love this woman. I'm going to do anything I can so as to make her mine. Those are wonderful examples throughout the Bible of what's being established, of what's being presented. So do not allow anybody to deceive you or mislead you into thinking that, well, this is all about a patriarchy or chauvinism and just making sure that man stays on top. It's all about making sure that things run smoothly. You cannot have a smooth running operation without a chain of command. And guess what? Man is not at the top. God is at the top. Then Christ, then man, then woman. Man needs woman. Guess what? We all need God. And in that reality, it's a humbling and sobering effect on all of us to recognize, you know what? Just because I have this role doesn't make me any better than you, because I have the same needs that you do. I need God. I need salvation. I need forgiveness. And the fact that I have a wife says that I need a helper. The fact that I had to marry my wife shows and proves I could not go life on my own. Same thing says about the woman. Why did the woman get married? Because she needs somebody to help her. So we're in this together. When it comes to the home, that's what it is. We become a team, working towards the same goal. We become one flesh. As we're in the church, hey, we're all one. We're all the same. We all have the same needs and we all have the same goals. But inside of those needs and goals, You just got to have individuals doing certain works, and you're not needing to go outside of that so as to have the work to continue. That is all for this class of 1 Corinthians. We hope that you'll come back and join us for the upcoming classes as we continue to break down the head covering 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and as we will break down the situation of the Lord's Supper and the division that was centered around that. Have any questions or comments? I don't think we have any right now. So if you have any questions or comments, leave those down below, and we will address them at another time. Thank you.